There's a pattern I see over and over again, and it's the one that scares people the most. Your back pain starts with something big, a heavy deadlift, a bad squat, maybe even a car accident. Like something that actually makes sense, though, as a reason for your back pain. So you rest, you recover, maybe you do PT, you move on. And then it happens again. But this time, it wasn't a heavy deadlift. It was something smaller. Maybe it was a workout. Maybe it was a long drive. And then it happens again from something even smaller. A sneeze, picking something off the floor, rolling over in bed. And now you're terrified because you don't even know what's going to set it off next. And that's the thing nobody explains. Like, why does this just keep happening? Why does it keep coming from smaller and smaller things? And that's ultimately what I want to talk about today. So here's what's actually going on. Every time your back flares up, you pull back, you rest, you avoid the things that give you pain without actually rebuilding, though. So then your threshold drops. Think of this like a bucket. Like your back has a capacity bucket, and everything you do throughout the day fills that bucket. Sitting at your desk, working, walking, lifting, bending, and then when that bucket overflows, you flare up. Now here's the problem. So every time that you do flare up and you just rest without rebuilding, that bucket itself gets smaller. So now it just takes less to overflow it. And then the more things happen, the less and less that it takes to overflow it until eventually you're picking up paper towels off the floor, you're picking up a pen off the floor, and your back goes out. That's not bad luck. That's not your body betraying you. That's a bucket that's been shrinking for years because nobody ever showed you how to make it bigger. So this is where I want to introduce something that most people have never heard of, and it's called tissue tolerance, and it's completely different from strength. And this is the part that trips everyone up because most people think, oh, if I get strong enough, like if I just do enough back extensions, enough core work, enough hip strengthening, eventually the flares will stop, right? But that's not how it works. You can be strong enough to do a movement, like muscle wise, and your nervous system will still guard against it. It'll still brace, it'll still spasm, still flare up the next day because strength and tissue tolerance are two completely different things. So, strength is your muscle's ability to produce force, ability to contract. Tissue tolerance is your nervous system's ability to actually trust that movement is safe. And you can have one without the other for sure. I've talked to guys who can hold a 3 minute iso hold on a back extension, strong enough to do it all day long. But they were still waking up every morning just wondering, is today the day that my back is going to go out again? Right? That's not a strength problem. That's a tissue tolerance problem. Their nervous system never got the message that loading their back was actually safe, so it kept the threshold low, kept the bucket small, and kept flaring up from smaller and smaller things. So now you're probably thinking, okay, I've been doing the physio, I've been doing the exercises. Why hasn't that raised my tissue tolerance? Because most of what people try is just designed to manage pain, not actually raise tolerance, right? The chiropractor cracks you, feels better for a day, but the tolerance is unchanged. The physio gives you bird dogs, dead bugs, core gets a little stronger, but your tolerance is just unchanged. The massage you get, it loosens things up, feels great for a day, maybe even a week. Once again, the tolerance is unchanged. And none of those things are sending your nervous system the signal it actually needs, which is it is safe to load this area progressively. It's safe to contract, it is safe to move. Because here's the thing, your nervous system doesn't care that you've been going to physio for 6 months, right? It doesn't care that your MRI looks better. It doesn't care that your surgeon said the surgery was successful. It only believes what you show it through consistent progressive loading. That's the only evidence it accepts. And until you give it that evidence, the bucket stays small. The threshold stays low. and the flare-ups keep coming from smaller and smaller things, right? So what does raising tissue tolerance actually look like? And it starts way earlier than most people think, not at the level where you think you should be, not at the level you were before the injury, at the level your nervous system can actually handle right now. And that honestly might feel embarrassingly easy, a hold, not even a rep. Just teaching your back that contraction is safe. That's it. Because the goal in the beginning isn't to build strength. The goal is to show your nervous system that loading this area isn't a threat, that it doesn't have to guard, that it doesn't have to brace for impact every time you move. And once you establish that, once you start building that trust, that's when you can actually progress. That's when the bucket starts getting bigger. That's when flare-ups start coming from less and less things. Until eventually, you're picking something up off the floor and you don't even think about your back. Not because it healed overnight, right? But because you gave it enough evidence over enough time that it finally stopped treating movement as a threat. That's the shift. And that's what changes everything. And it's not complicated, right? It just requires starting at the right level. Not the level your ego wants to be at, but the level your nervous system is actually at right now. If this helped, and if this explains what you've been experiencing, if the shrinking threshold, the smaller and smaller triggers, if all that sounds familiar, then you're not broken. You just haven't raised your tissue tolerance yet. And that's fixable. So there are two ways I can help you if you actually want to start changing this. So first thing, I put together a free masterclass that walks through exactly how we rebuild and how the rebuild process works and why tissue tolerance is just the piece that everyone skips. The link is in the description for that. Secondly, if you're ready to stop figuring this out on your own and you want a structure plan built specifically around where you're at right now, there's an application link in the description to work with me directly. I only work with a small number of people at a time because I want to be fully hands-on and give the personalized coaching. But if you're serious, that link is there, and I'll see you in the next one.